Hello, I'm Catherine Martinez. Thanks for joining me for this video entitled Give Thanks Part 1. At this time of year, we look forward to fall decorating and holidays, one of which is Thanksgiving. With us beginning our project now, you'll have plenty of time to complete it and enjoy it. We are heading towards this table runner or wall hanging as our goal. Part 1 will be the pumpkin block at the top. Part 2 will cover the turkey and pie blocks. We begin with the shape of the pumpkin. As in all of my previous webinars or videos, you know that I strongly encourage you to find your artwork from that in the public domain and royalty-free. I found a new site offering some very fun stuff. It's called the Graphics Fairy. If we go here and search for pumpkin stencil, you'll see what comes to screen is this very fun pumpkin with space in between. We're going to click on the pumpkin, and you'll see, if we scroll down, see that it is a full-size printable PDF. You could print it and then scan it in as a JPEG to use in Perfect Embroidery Pro. Or you could use a tool that comes with Windows. It is a screen capture tool called Snipping Tool. If you don't already have it active for you to use, let me walk you through how you'll do that. We'll come down here to the Start button. I am in Windows 10, so this icon is in the bottom left corner. We'll go ahead and click on that. It automatically puts me in the search block. I am going to search for SNIPP, and that's enough for the name to come up. You see here at the top, Snipping Tool. I'll go ahead and click on that. And here down at the bottom, you see that I have a dialog box or menu area that allows me to use the snipping tool. We're back in our pumpkin. This is the small version of that pumpkin, and since I'm using the screen capture tool, I'm going to scroll up here so that I can see the larger pumpkin. Come back down here. Do you notice how the snipping tool is on my taskbar? I'm going to click on that to allow it to come back to screen so I can see it. And then I will click on New. I bring my mouse over to drag around the picture that I want. So a click and drag will select this pumpkin. Again, I can do this because I know that on this particular site, thegraphicsfairy.com, that these things are free and available to me. They are both royalty-free and in the public domain. The snipping tool has allowed me to capture that pumpkin. I will come up here to File, Save As. I'm going to allow it to save into this Give Thanks folder. I do want to give it a name though, so I'll call it Pump Sten. Go ahead and put the whole word stencil. Notice that it is saving it in a PNG file, which is what we need to use in PEP. Clicking on the Save, that now has been saved, but we see that we're still in my snipping tool. I am going to come down here on the taskbar, right-click, and ask to pin to my taskbar. That means the snipping tool will be on my taskbar whether I'm using it or not. It will always be available to me. Now I'll go ahead and close. Come back into Perfect Embroidery Pro in my clean screen. We will come over here to the Backdrop tool. Here is my pumpkin. I'm in my proper folder. I'll go ahead and double-click that and bring it to screen. I could size this right now if I'd like to do so. I'll click and drag on the handle. Down in the bottom left of my screen, I see that this is a 4-inch high, almost a 4-inch wide pumpkin. So we'll go ahead and size that just a little bit. Go ahead and double click on my magnifying glass so that it is in my screen. And at this point, I'm going to use my pen and my magic wand and simply click within each of the spaces, and the magic wand will automatically trace around the shape of those pieces of the pumpkin. This one is very easy to do, as you see. I'll go ahead and get my select tool to turn that magic wand off. And now I'll come down here to the lower left of the toolbox, and I will use the Show Hide Backdrop image. That has hidden the pumpkin artwork, but it allows me to see the shapes of the design that I have, and this is where we're going to begin. I'll go ahead and turn the stem into a brown color, and then I'll choose all of the pieces of the pumpkin that are currently in blue, and I'll make them orange. That way it looks a little bit more realistic to me. And at this point, before I go any further, I'm going to do a File, Save As, and call this Pumpkin Art, and I'm saving it as a C2S file so that in the future, if I want to come back to this design, I don't have to recapture that art as we just did. With this art on screen, we can play with our many options on the final look of the pumpkin. We could convert this pumpkin, all of it, so let me come over here to our sequence view and click on all items, and I'll right click, convert to, and turn it into an applique. I'll come over here and turn on my 3D, my realistic preview, so you can see what that looks like. If I were going to follow with this, there are a number of things that I like to do with an applique, one of which is to change the color. And for this pumpkin, I'm going to change that applique density to a 0.3. So with those two changes, I'll do an apply. There would be my applique pumpkin. Option 2 would allow me to do a right click, convert to, and this time let's change it to a complex fill. Here it comes in as a solid. Let me leave the stem as a solid, but in this case, choosing the orange pieces, coming over to our fill type, clicking for a drop down, I'm going to choose motif. Let me go find 103. I'll go ahead and apply, and all of the pieces of pumpkin are set to that particular complex fill. We could leave it like that, or I could then go in and create different motifs for each piece of the pumpkin. Now this is pretty tight for me, so I might come up here and make that an 8 and apply. I like that bigger look better, and then again choosing the additional pieces and going in to pick the ones that I like. I know I'm going to bump these sizes up, so I might as well do it before I apply. And again, you see what we're doing here is going in to make each of the individual pumpkin pieces a different motif. And what this does, I think, is to give a little bit of that Zentangle look to our pumpkin. I like that look. I think it's fun. And again, we could continue to do that. So there is another option. But with option 3, we're going to make this a little bit more artsy. So I will select all of the design, right click. I'm going to convert it back right now to a artwork. And what I'd like to do in option 3 is to make this pumpkin a little bit more artsy. We're going to create letters that follow the shape of these individual pieces of the pumpkin. Let me show you where we're headed here with our goal. A little close-up of that pumpkin, and you can see where we're going to go in and make the letters of the word thanks adhere to the shapes of the different pieces of the pumpkin. All right, back to our screen. Because we want the letters open and we need to be able to edit the points of the letters, we must bring them in as artwork. We'll come up here to File, come down to Import True Type Text. I'm going to type in all caps, thanks. This is our word. We'll use the ellipse to go get the font that we are interested in. We want a plain font. Any decorative or curlicue points would be lost as we manipulate the shape. We also have typed our word in all caps so that we don't have to deal with ascenders or descenders. The one that I've chosen to play with is the Arial Rounded. And we come over here, bold is the default, that will work for us. But take a look at the size. It comes in at 120. I'm going to bump that up to a 300. And what that does for us is allows us to have a little bigger word to play with. You may have noticed when you've brought your TrueType fonts in this artwork and you leave them at that 12 or the 16, they're very small, and you still have to go ahead and size them anyway. So here we have letters that are a good size. I'll go ahead and select that again and just drag those up above the pumpkin. And then something else I'm going to do, let me bring this down to a 75. I'm going to right-click, copy, right-click, paste, and then change the color of that second wording, putting those over to the side just in case I need them. And I do this often when I'm playing. If I'm not sure where I'm headed with something, I always give myself a little backup copy so I don't have to start from scratch. All right, so that'll be out of our way. We don't have to think about it. And now we're going to work with the T. We want this T, remember it is artwork. We're going to rotate it and size it and place it within this shape of the pumpkin. Our word is going to start with THANKS. How about that? We have the right amount of letters for the right amount of pieces of our pumpkin. Funny how that works out. Now I'm going to zoom in quite a bit so that I can play with the shape of the letter, trying to get it into this shape of my pumpkin. The first thing I'm going to do is make it a little narrower and a little shorter, and then drag that up, and I now see that I have a little bit of this T stuck out. I might want to rotate it just a little bit more. At this point, we start to decide how we want to distort that letter so it's still easy to read. I'm going to grab these points right here and bring that to that area, and you see how I'm just picking up my points and placing them within the shape of my pumpkin piece right here. So again, I might shape that a little differently. I'm putting those squares right across from each other, bringing those up. I could even delete some of these points by dragging around and deleting, and then bringing the bar right back up. And again, I might want to bring those in just a little bit, maybe down. And all of this is playing. It is great exercise for you to work with your points if you're not used to playing with your shape tool. So even though we have distorted it, it still looks like a T. I could even bring that point up just a little bit more if I wanted. I could put a little hump right there in that straight line to have it sort of go along with that curve of the pumpkin piece. Maybe bring that down just a little bit. I could do whatever I want to the letter as long as I still keep its original shape. These might be over just a little bit too much, and you can see what I'm doing here is very real. It is what I did when I did the project. I'm going to select those points, except I didn't want to pick this one, so I'll select those again, right click and smooth so that they fit better into that area. I'll do the same here and right click smooth, and that one looks pretty good. I will make this one smooth, just in case. I could put another point right there and drag that up just a little bit, and you see how that gives a visual that that letter is curved just as the pumpkin piece is curved. I could also go into the pumpkin piece and delete a number of these sort of hump points, and then just put one in there to give myself a little bit more. Again, I can play however much I think I want to. I could get rid of these if I don't like that jagged edge, or I might want to leave them because it looks a little bit more realistic. I might drag that point out just a little bit to be on the outside of my T. At this point, we can back out and see that we have the letter T as it should be, and we'll continue our project with the H. I'm going to zoom in on this area. Oops, come over just a little bit here. All right, I know that I want this letter to be taller, so I will drag that down. I also know that I want to rotate it so that it is more on a curve of my pumpkin piece. I'm going to back out just a little bit to see if I can take a look at that entire piece, and I'm going to have to back out even more. Maybe I'll put in a 150 as my zoom and come down. That allows me to see the whole pumpkin piece and my letter. Again, I know that I need to bring that up even more, I'll put that rotate back and then size it a little taller before I rotate. I like that better. I do have some editing to do, and here we have the letter being wider than the pumpkin piece, so I can continue to make it narrow. But at this point, I think I will go into my letter itself and start to make those editing changes to distort that letter H just a little bit. I know that I want the points of that H to be up here. I'm not going to worry just yet about them being, that wiggle of them being incorrect. At any point I can go ahead and right click and smooth those out a bit. Do the same here with my letter H. I like that little bit of curve. It looks as if it's following the shape of the pumpkin. I can bring those in a little bit, and I'm going to shorten up the bar for the H, come down here and play with my bottom feet of the H, so I'll bring those closer to the shape of the pumpkin, maybe even delete a point if I don't want to deal with it or I don't need to. Certainly here I need another point, so we'll do an add point and drag. This one needs to be adjusted as well. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm just adding and deleting and moving points as I think necessary to get the shape of the letter into the shape of the pumpkin. There is no right or wrong here. It is a great exercise for you to play with, getting used to your points and what you can do with them. It is one of the great features, I think, of Perfect Embroidery Pro, that it allows us this creativity to direct shapes as we want them. And you can see what I did just there. I made that leg of the H a little wider. I can do whatever I want. I can distort as much as I want or as little as I want, depending on the shape of the pumpkin, how much space I have to play with. Again, I can do it until I think I'm happy. I do like the way that this looks as if it's breaking on that curve, so I don't want to get rid of that. I'm just going to continue to smooth those points, maybe grab one of those handles until I'm happy with the look that I have. Maybe if I drag that up just a little bit, make that a little wider, we can see that we have the H flowing. The bar needs to be a little bit more realistic across from each other. That looks better. Maybe drag that one down just a hair. But again, you see that there is no right or wrong in the way that we are shaping our letters to that pumpkin piece. Zooming out, we'll get our letter A. I need my select tool to do that. We'll come up here to the letter A. Something else that I can encourage you to do, we are working on a project that's going to take just a bit of our time to get all of these letters the way we want. I would encourage you to do a save as along the way. Remember, we currently have this called the pumpkin art, but now that we are putting our words in it, I'm going to do a file save as, which allows me to give it a different name. I'll click in there and backspace out the word art, and I'm going to put in the word thanks. So it is my pumpkin with the word thanks, and I have saved a copy up to this point. All right, we'll go forward with our letter A. I know it needs to be taller. For right now, I'm not going to deal with the width. I'll see if it fits within the space. We know that this pumpkin piece is wider than the previous. I do want to rotate it just a little bit, maybe move it up, see if I can get that size in there. And this is looking good. It fits at the top and almost at the bottom. I'm going to drag that over just a little bit. Let's go ahead and zoom back in. Here we're going to play with our points. Before I do that, let me go back in. Instead of playing with my points, I think I'm going to rotate it even more before I play with those points, so I have that angle. It's easier to move the points when they're already on the angle that you want them to be. So I will go ahead and move all of these over to the outside shape here. Again, I'm not going to be terribly concerned that they're lumpy at the moment. I know that I'm going to fix that. I even can distort this letter A even more than I'd like. Let me delete some of these points. I'll right click and delete them and bring this leg over a bit and this leg in. That point needs to be within the size, and you can see what I'm doing. I'm reshaping the letter just a little bit based on our pumpkin space. Okay, I can make this a little shorter if I see the need, and then I can bring over these points, and actually let me see what this will do. If I bring over that whole leg, I do need to move my screen down just a bit so I can see what I'm doing here. And then maybe again coming in here and right click, deleting those points, and just playing with these. Sometimes the fewer points the better. Again, there is no right or wrong here. I can just play until I'm happy with the look that I have. Might need to move that point over just a little bit since I made that so curvy. And I kind of like that the way it is. So I would select these points here, right click, do a smooth, do the same with these two, right click smooth. This one is smooth enough, but just in case I'll go ahead and do that. That gives me the handles that I need, and then I'll do the right click smooth for those two down here. Oops, I don't really want that one right there. It needs to be a line, not a smooth. So we'll go ahead and right click on just that and ask it to be a line instead. And let's see what if I choose to right click and do that as a smooth. Okay, I like the look of that a little bit, and I can bring that up and so forth. So again, maybe play around with the letter until you're happy with the way that it fits in there. I really like this exercise. We'll double click there to zoom back out. We'll get our select key, drag our letter in, make it taller by dragging our handles. Okay, maybe a little too tall there. And then I'm going to rotate it so it's on the angle of that shape. This one is going to be interesting because I have the same width across the N at the top and bottom, so I'll have to do a little distortion there. But that's part of the fun, is to see what we come up with. I zoomed in with one click, but I will scoot up so that we can see the whole letter and the whole piece of the pumpkin. I'll go ahead and get my shape tool that gives me the points. These points look pretty good. I'm just going to move them over just a little bit there. And in this case, I'll click and drag around those. I'm going to put those right there for the moment to see what else I might want to do. Here, I'll drag this one point over, knowing that I'm going to need to add a point to bend around this area. I could even add another point to bring it in a little closer. I can bring this point down farther. I could then right click those 2 points and delete them so that I have fewer to deal with as I'm shaping my letter in. But you see now we look a little bit like an op art. Because this is still so narrow, I'm going to drag that one point down a little bit to emphasize the N. And this is where I would want to do an add point, drag that over. I'm going to smooth this one out right away so that I can bring that over here. If I wanted to bring all of the points up, I'm just going to use these 2 points right there and then delete all of those just because it was easier to do that, and just add my 1 point, which will allow me to bring that down. If I wanted to, I could make that a line since this is an N and it's supposed to be points. Or if I look at that and decide, I don't know if I really like the point there, I can go ahead and make that a smooth and then sort of shape that. If this is too far over, select those and move those over a bit. Maybe this point needs to be not as long, and maybe another point here where we can add and shape our letter in. But once again, you're playing to get the shape of these letters inside the shape of the pumpkin piece. And here I'm simply selecting a number of points and doing a right click and doing a smooth so I can do just that, smooth those points out. And if I do a number at one time, it saves me a little time, as you see. And I just go around until I'm happy with the look that I have for my letters. Maybe a little straighter there. But again, we can play as much as we want. There is no right or wrong here on these letters. You're going to be happy with your finished product and however much time you want to play with them. And again, none of this is wasted time. You're getting very good at using your points and your smooth and all of those tools that we have available to us. A double click will bring us back out. I'll get my select. I have a K. The K is going to be very similar to the N in that we have four legs here, the left side and the right side and the points and so forth, as is offered in the shape of the K. I have made it elongated. I'm going to rotate it just a bit and put it where I think it should be. And this will be the letter probably that takes the most editing on our part. So we'll go ahead once again and zoom in, scoot so I can see both the letter and the shape of the pumpkin. Maybe make this a little skinnier. You see where I just brought the side of that K over here. At this point, I think I'm just going to delve into my points. So we'll go ahead and use our shape key. I will bring all of those over, knowing, oops, I don't like the look of that, so we'll just bring just the top parts over, knowing full well that I need to add some points and definitely do some editing on this letter for it to fit in my space here. K point needs to be out just a little bit, so our lines are here. Let's see if I do a smooth, if I like the look of that. That came out pretty nice. And then once again, I'm going to put these 2 points here that cause that bend, that allow the K to look as if it's bending, just like the shape of this pumpkin. I need to do a little bit of cleanup here as well. So I think what I'm going to do is just delete those top points of that K. I have lefts to play with as I bring these in, and even if I wanted to bring this up just a little bit, move those over. Again, you can see that really we're just playing. At this point, I have distorted it to a point where I don't think that's easy to know that that's the letter K. So I'm going to bring these points of the letter down farther than I might normally do in the letter K, but this way you're going to see that dip, and that upper arm of the K is going to be more noticeable. We'll go ahead and play here as we bring some of these around. Once again, I'm going to delete a handful of these so I don't have to play with them. Just bring my one down here, and then you see it makes it easier for us to play with the shape of that letter. I like what that looks like, follows that shape a lot, and I'll right click and do a smooth. Again, we are playing, and we need this to look like the letter K. I'm going to select these points and delete them, and then I'll bring these points up so I can see what I have to play with. I might want to exaggerate that leg a little bit, and maybe I want to exaggerate the point of that K, and therefore move these over just a little bit as well. And maybe another point in there will allow that to curve. So by doing that, you see I have exaggerated the point and allowed this to be more like a K, even though we had to work a little bit to get that in that shape. One last thing is I would do my right click smooth, making sure that I like the look of all of these points before I move on. Oh, I don't care for that one. So we will go ahead and right click on this particular point and make that align so that we keep that straight. Here, let's see if I can wiggle 2 points out of that. Do a right click and smooth. Bring that out just a little bit, bring him in just a little bit, and a smooth for each of those. Again, I am doing a right click and smooth, and I might be going fast, but as you play with these, you're going to get that speed too, because you're going to be comfortable with how to edit these points. And that is one of the reasons for this project. Once again, we'll double click on our magnifying glass to zoom out. I'll get my select key, and the last letter that we have is the S. I'll drag that down into position, and I'll zoom in just a little bit here. Select it because we are going to make it narrow, and I'm going to make it shorter and maybe even a little bit more narrow. And the thing about this letter S is we want to try to not have to do very many positionings with the points of the S itself, because this letter, if we distort it, will be difficult to tell that it is the letter S. I'm really going to work with what I have and simply make it narrow enough and maybe just a little bit longer to fit within my space. And then I can rotate it just a little bit to fit it in there better. So you can see we did not do a whole lot of work on the points, and the reason for that is an S is tough to distort and still have it look the way it needs to look, or the shape of that letter. Go ahead and zoom out. Now that I've played with my pumpkin, I know that I do not need this extra or backup word thing, so I'll go ahead and select it and delete it from my keyboard. Again, a double click on my magnifying glass will give us a full screen of our pumpkin. Our pumpkin is taking shape, so the next thing we want to do is to convert all of these pieces of artwork into a run stitch. We'll go ahead and come up to the very top. I'm simply going to choose all items, right click, convert to run. I am going to make them all a bean stitch and apply. That would be my choice. Having done that, we do want to add the word give to our stem. This time, since we do want full text, we'll go ahead and use our text tool. I'll click on screen. I'm going to come over here to the properties text and type in the word give. I will put it in all caps. You can see that the rounded small is the font chosen. It is a small font. You can see the recommended height range there from a 0.16 to a 0.3 inch. So it's going to work very well within our space. I am going to apply it. We see it here on screen. I'll do a select, a right click. We'll go ahead and make it green. We're also going to come over here to the type, make that a vertical path. We now will come over into our transform to give it a height of about 1.5. Certainly, depending on the size of your pumpkin, you might want to have that be a little different. I'm going to click and drag and drop that right in our stem. That's a good size. I could make it a little bigger if I wanted to, just by dragging that handle. I'm going to zoom in because we're going to play just a bit. I want to make sure that you can see this well. We'll click back on our text tool so that we're brought into our text edit mode. This is what gives us our black triangles that allows us to move each of the characters individually. I will rest on the black triangle of the E and drag and drop that over just a little bit. Do the same with our V, maybe the I just a hair down over a little bit, and maybe the G over to the left, maybe not quite that far, and up just a little bit. So remember, in your text edit mode, you can play with those individual characters, and we're giving it more the shape of the stem. I'll select it. One other thing I would want to do here is to come into the fill. I like my density to be a 0.3 when I deal with letters, and that makes that a little tighter in there. We'll go ahead and double click on our magnifying glass, looking at our pumpkin. If we would like to visualize these areas as an applique, remember we talked about options here. We turned the whole pumpkin into an applique at the beginning, but what if we wanted to make this a raw edge applique? Let's go ahead and choose just the orange pieces. Coming up here to properties and clicking on fabric, I'll come over to the ellipse, click on that, and chances are I'm going to make those pieces orange, so I'll go ahead and OK that. And here we see the pieces filled in, what it would look like if we made these the raw edge applique. Again, if we're playing, we can click on the letters themselves. What would it look like if we had a double applique, where the pieces of the pumpkin are one fabric and then the individual letters would be another fabric. So once again, I'll choose the properties fabric, use my ellipse, and we'll go down and see if we can find a gold color and OK that. And here you have the look where I have the pumpkin pieces, an orange fabric, and then the letters would be gold. And you can decide if you like that look or not. To finish, I am going to go into the stem, once again into the fabric, the ellipse, and choose a soft color. We'll just play with this one and make that brown and OK it. And that gives me a feeling of what that project might look like. Remember too that at any point you can come down here to your background color and you could play, do I want to put all of this project perhaps on a soft yellow fabric? That's what it would look like. Or if I wanted something more in a soft orange, maybe a pale coral, do I like that look? So again, Perfect Embroidery Pro gives us all of these tools to play with our project before we actually go and stitch it out. I am going to put this back to white. Just wanted to refresh you that you have that opportunity to do it. But again, this is your project and you can decide the look that you are after. I'm going to go ahead and remove the fabric from my letters. So I'll once again come into fabric. This time I need to click on the down arrow so that I can choose none and apply. We could stop there, but why would we? Something in the background would be very interesting. Maybe we want to add stippling. First, I'd like to go ahead and turn on my show hoop. I know that I'm going to put this in my 8x8 hoop, so that is a 200 by 200. We'll do an OK. This gives me the area of the block that I'm going to be creating. If I want to size that down just a little bit, I'll go ahead and select all. If I rest on a corner handle, my arrows will give me the size. This is about a 6.3. Bring that down just a little bit. I will right click on the ruler and center that. It's going to give me a little bit more area here to play with. If I want some background stippling, as we suggested, I'm going to go ahead and get my rectangle and click and drag a square to define that area that's going to hold the stippling. I'll select it. I am going to change it. Let's put that into a light green. A right click, convert to, stippling is found under complex fill. Here I'll come over to standard, come down to stippling, and apply it. And first of all, we see that that stippling is going to go over our design. With our box selected, I'm going to come up here and ask it to stitch first, and we see the stippling in the entire area. Now what happens here, and it's probably what we don't want to happen, the stippling goes in all of that area, even the open area of our pumpkin stencil. So instead of just creating one large square, we're going to have to define the area of the pumpkin itself. So let's do an undo. We have our, we'll undo again, and once again, so I just have my square. And if we look over into sequence, we see that it is back to being artwork. And then the other thing I need to do is to trace around the shape of the pumpkin. I can't use the outline feature here because the outline is going to give me just the pieces of the pumpkin. We'll go up to pen, and I simply will trace, click and drag just outside the pumpkin, and I don't have to be really critical here. I certainly can go back when I'm finished and smooth out the points if I want to, but I'm just defining the area of the pumpkin that will allow us to put that stippling in there without having it go inside those open areas. And I'll go ahead and give myself a little up for the stem, and I'm going to do the letter C on the keyboard to close that shape. I will select it. That too will be green, and if I wanted, I could go in and select the majority of my points, right click and smooth them out, just as we did on the shapes of our letters. Again, right click, making those smooth, whatever I thought I wanted to do to the shape. But once again, it's not critical for these points because I'm going to add stippling in there, which will not come up to the exact points that I draw. All right, here's my second piece of artwork. Let's select it. I will hold down my Control key on the keyboard and select the square. The trick is to come up here to your Combine key. We'll go ahead and click on that. And what we just did, if you can come over here to Sequence and look, we have just created the square with the pumpkin shape inside of it. So that is one unit. Now if I do right click, convert to complex fill, it's going to make it solid. But again, over to standard, drop down and ask for stippling. We'll go ahead and leave it at the maze. And here is one of your options for completing your block. We have other choices other than maze. We have the Hilbert or the piano. That gives a different look as well. So again, your choice on stippling. We could also put a fill in there. Go back to our motif. Let's do our drop down, and I'll find number 1, 2, 3. Set that pattern to be a 15, which is pretty high, but that way it is a larger area in the background. You might decide you like that. One of the other choices that we don't use very often, if I do a right click and convert that to a cross stitch. A lot of times people forget that this is in here. Now that's very tight, so I would come over to my size and make that a 10 millimeter and apply, and you can see that that gives a very nice look as well in the background. So again, you have choices, but we have one more choice, and that is we could make our own stippling. Have you seen stippling that incorporates artwork? Let's take a peek here as we move forward. Have you noticed this in any of the embroidery designs that are available for sale where they have incorporated some artwork within the stippling? You might see something like that. Well, we're going to learn how to create stippling, and ours is going to look similar to this. I saw Tamara do something like this years ago, and it intrigued me, so let me add some of my own touches to this look. Back in Perfect Embroidery Pro, we're going to simply hide that background that we've created, and here we're going to go in to our Text Designs drop-down arrow, choose Applique Shapes. If you scroll down alphabetical order to Halloween, you'll see that we have a pumpkin, actually 2 of them, but I have used Halloween 03. We'll click on that, OK it. It comes to screen as an applique. So let's do a right click, convert to artwork. It's now smaller, and I'm going to make it even smaller. Drag that up to be just about 0.7. Let me check on my size over here. I'll make that a little smaller, 0.7. And I'm going to drag that up here to the top left corner. One of the tools that we have in PEP that make this so easy to do, we have one design created. I want you to come up here and click on your drop down for carousel and choose scatter. And we see that it takes that one design and multiplies it in different sizes into the size hoop or size area that is defined. We have the 8x8 set, which is fine for what we're doing with our pumpkin, but I do want to change the minimum size. It's going to bump it down to 80. I want no smaller than my original design, if you remember, as a 0.7. So I'm going to type in the 100. In other words, I don't want anything smaller than my original. Here in the minimum distance, I don't want so many pumpkins, so I'm going to make that a 0.6. Then I'll apply and see if I like what I have here. You may remember that you could continue to apply until you see the scattered pattern that you might like for yours. I'll do it one more time, and then we'll go ahead and OK and bring that to screen. Here is the square of my scattered pumpkins. I'm going to click and drag that group to place it within my 8x8 hoop. You can see that this show hoop was a good idea, so it's helping us to define our area. Also, I need to come up here to ungroup so that I can play with these pumpkins individually. For example, click and drag those pumpkins and place them around. Remember, we are going to create our own customized stippling. I can click on that and drag it over. That's too big, so maybe now I could size it just a little bit. If that pumpkin gets in your way, remember we can come over here to our sequence view and click on our eyeball to hide it. That will help us grab those other pumpkins that might have ended up in the middle and maybe a size just a little bit, maybe a fun rotate. Here's another one that's kind of in there. He's a little big. I purposely left my minimum size at 100 so that I could have control over the pumpkins where I place them and also the size and positioning of them. If I want one more, I can go ahead and maybe put him a little further down, maybe drag him down. What I don't want to do is have too many of these, maybe 3 in each corner, maybe 1 on the side, and then we'll leave 2 in that bottom corner. And I do want space between them because what we're going to do next is to attach them with lines. But the next thing that I want to do is to arrange these a logical order from maybe the top left corner and moving around. As they are now, if you take a look here over in my sequence view with artwork, if I click on these, you can see that the pumpkins are not necessarily in a logical stitch out order, and I would prefer that they go in a roundabout order. So I'll click on this first one, and what I then can do is come up and ask it to move it to front, which in essence is going to put it in the last stitch out position. Do you see where that is now in the very last position over here in sequence view? All I need to do is walk myself around the project, selecting the next pumpkin, putting it in the last position, this pumpkin last, and so forth. You see that I am creating my order of how these scattered pumpkins will be stitched out. So I'll go ahead and finish. It won't take too long for us to do this. And you can see that I have control over my stippling by putting it in the stitch out position that I prefer. And again, that would be last. So now I know the order of my pumpkins, and it's at this point that I'm going to attach them with a artwork line. I'll zoom in just a bit so you can see what we're doing here. Come up to my artwork, grab my pen. I am going to use a different color, red, so that you can follow along with what I'm doing. I want to attach these or combine them so that it is a stipple, that they all stitch out at one time. I'll start my line by clicking here, and then I can do a sort of loop-de-loop, not worrying that they are not smooth at the moment. I'll do a right click to end, start again on the other side of the pumpkin, and maybe do another loop-de-loop just to give us some interest in the stippling. Right click to end, start again, and maybe no loop-de-loop, but just a small curve. Again, bear with me, we will smooth those out when we're finished. Come off this pumpkin, and I can make it curve as I'd like it to into that pumpkin. Right click to end, do another click. I'm going to put some curve points in there, right click to end. Let's scoot down. Remember, we are attaching each pumpkin to the next one in line, and I can do a little loop-de-loop here and maybe 2 loop-de-loops before I come down and click on the pumpkin. A right click to end, and I'll do that. Not very fancy there, but in this space I am going to do another loop-de-loop, so I'll come over here, and you see, you're really just making an oddball triangle when you do a loop-de-loop. Right click to end, and then maybe just to be different, I can come off of this one and bring my lines up here a little bit before I come back into my pumpkin. Right click to end, and here's one more. Right click to end, and then my final, let's see, I have 2 more here. So we'll do make this one just a little bit curvy of interest, no loop-de-loop, but that'll still give me some interest. And then finally to connect these last 2 pumpkins, and I'll do a little bit of a curve there and right click. All right, having added all of our lines, the next very important thing to do is make sure that each of our red lines are touching our blue pumpkins. So here is where we're going to want to zoom in quite a bit to make sure that we can see right here it's touching, right here it is not. So let me get my shape tool so I have my points. I need for these lines to touch. Here we see if I select this, I'm going to bring that line in just a little bit more. And at this point, we're simply going to keep scrolling over. And not only do they touch, but maybe I want to alter the point that they are touching each other. Let me go back up. I think that's just a little bit of a loop-de-loop. And sometimes where that might be too much of a direct into the point of the pumpkin, maybe I want to smooth that out a little bit. This is important part. You need to make sure that these lines are touching so that we have an unbroken stipple. That's what we're after. You see right here they do not, so I'm going to bring that more on the line and continue to scroll down. This one looks good, this one does not, so I'll grab that and have it land on the line. Again, we're simply scrolling down and fixing where our straight line meets our pumpkin. This one does not meet, so I need to drag that up just a little bit more. And again, what I'm doing is very real here. Takes a moment, but it is so well worth it. We'll simply make all of our lines touch on our pumpkins. Very fun. I think you're going to like this. We're going to see it again in our part 2. That one, oops, grab the pumpkin instead of my line, and maybe I'd like to move that line over just a bit. Again, a few more to check on. That one looks good. This one I think is short just a bit. This one definitely is short, so we'll go ahead and touch that to the stem. This one way off. So here I think it would be better if we brought that line up so it wasn't so much at the side of the pumpkin, and this touches, this one does not, so we'll bring that down. Once again, this is an important part of our stippling, so we'll go ahead and make sure that all of that touch. And I believe that's where we did not start here. We had this one last one. I'll bring that down just a bit, and once again, that looks good. All right, we will zoom out. I'll get my select key. We now know that we have all of those touching. Our next step is to combine our line that we added to connect the pumpkins and the pumpkins themselves. So we know the lines are red. I have selected all of those. I have all of the red selected. I'll scoot up and I'm going to hold down my control key and select the blue. We will come up here to our combine key, and when you see what happens is we no longer have the red, they are all in blue. I am going to turn that to red just so that it stands out a little bit more for us to see. And then finally, all of those loop-de-loops I put in are very angular. We want those points to be smooth. If I now come over to my shape tool, I can click and drag around those points, right-click, smooth. If you feel a little bit more comfortable by zooming in just a bit, we can do that as well. Click and drag around those loop-de-loops, right-click, smooth. Even if there is no loop-de-loop, I want the ones that are connecting the pumpkins to be smooth. Here, smooth, right-click, smooth. Again, those 2 points, a right-click, smooth. I can go ahead and come over here. I don't have, let me try that again and get just these points. Right-click, smooth. Scoot down just a little bit here. I want all of those smooth, even though there's no loop-de-loop there. Again, we are selecting all of our points. If I have just one left over, I can hold down my control and grab that guy and do a right-click, smooth. Again, I can select as many as I can with my click and drag and do a smooth. I have these two guys that need to be smoothed out, and then I have all of those, a right-click, smooth. And you can see what we're doing here. It is not hard. It might be just a little bit time-consuming, but honestly well worth it, because look what you have just done. You have created your own stipple. At this point, let's do a right-click, convert to run. Ta-da! Custom stippling. I am going to come over here into sequence view and select that green that we have hidden. I'll go ahead and bring it back out. That was the shape that we played if we wanted to add normal stipple or a motif. I'm going to at this point just delete it. So a delete off my keyboard, because I've decided I like that custom stipple a lot better than the motif look. So there we have our pumpkin. At this point, we could bring back our orange applique so we can see it. As I look at this, I think I want to add just a little bit more interest to my letters. Remember those letters we played with, what they would look like if we made them applique fabric? But I'm actually going to copy paste them. I'll change my color to a dark, we've already used that here. I'll change that to a purple. And on the purple one, I'm going to right click, convert that to a complex fill. Come up here and make it a motif and use number 103. I know that I want it set a little larger to a 5 millimeter, and I'm going to OK it. And I like the look of that a little bit better. It is not as full as the applique fabric would make it, but it's going to give it more interest to stand out on that applique orange fabric. Now we need to address the idea of sequence. I want that stippling to stitch out first. So let's select it, come up here to our move to back key. I'll click on that. It's going to be in the very first position. And what that does is it just makes it easier for all of this applique fabric. I don't have to worry. You can see right there it's going to be under the fabric just a hair, and that's fine. That won't bother me at all. Now I need to have our orange applique fabric be next. It is in that line. I want to change the position of the outline stitch blue and the fill stitch purple. So I'm going to click on purple, drag it up and drop it on the orange so that it's going to stitch out after the orange, and then my blue bean stitch will be on top of that motif fill. I'll go ahead and collapse that. Then I have my applique stem, and it will be followed by the words and so forth. So there's the proper order that I would like this design to stitch, and of course I would do my file save as, and I might then just add my app to indicate that it is the finished application. I then would go back into my save as and save it as my machine format so I could take it to my machine and stitch. So here we have the first block. Let's review the embroidery process. You have your base fabric hooped up. In this case for me it was the green, and I have my stippling stitched. I would then lay a large piece of orange, which is going to be all of the applique pieces of the pumpkin. This is raw edge applique. So I can lay this piece here. It's going to stitch the individual pieces. In this next picture, I have gone ahead and trimmed the orange applique pieces and stitched out the complex fill and the outline stitch for those letters. It looks blue, but it really is a teal color on the project. Having trimmed, I then lay my piece down for my stem, stitch the stem and stitch those letters, and finally trim, and here we have the block. Once again, here is the project. We have done that first block. We will be making the other two in the Giving Thanks Part 2 video. Again, this is what your finished project could look like. I'd like you to have fun creating this block. Remember, it is yours, so change whatever you want to, whether you want your letters to be applique or a motif fill like we have it here. I've named this video Giving Thanks, not only for the message on each of the blocks, but also for the many blessings I have in my life, one of which are the cool tools and pep that make all of our projects easy to do. And also, thanks for being with me in this video. Enjoy!